welcome to The Lisa Show and our book club. We are reading More Than a Body by Lindsay and Lexie Kite, and we're excited to discuss Chapter 4, Part 2. And when I say we, I mean my esteemed guest.
Hello, I'm Whitney Call, and I am a writer and comedian and a huge fan of this book. So
we're excited you're here. And for those of you who are listening, you can also hop over to YouTube and watch our facial expressions as we get really excited about this book. And all the things that go on in it. I want to dive right back into where we left off in part one. We talked about, the constant pressure and how the message is for women to take up less space. Yeah. And I want to start, too, on something that they mentioned right in the middle of chapter 4, which is girls versus boys dress codes. And I thought it was really interesting when they talked about the dress codes. For men, it's like one sentence. Yeah. For women, it's like paragraph
Isn't that insane?
Paragraph about how a woman should appear.
Yeah.
And we could just simplify them. And I'm wondering what your experience has been with sort of dress codes and how you feel they should be, presented in the future, or how you're moving forward in the future.
I have thoughts, Lisa. Okay. And my first note in here says big boobs.
Got it. All right.
Because I am a person with a large chest, and I've always had a large chest. And so every item of clothing I've worn has been deemed like, what's the word? What's that L word? Lurid?
Oh.
Lurid.
Yeah. Oh,
and I'm not like, this is usually how I dress.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't really go crazy.
For those of you listening, she's wearing a cute jumper.
Oh, thank you.
And a t-shirt. So, yes, nothing unusual.
Yeah, and nothing trying to show anything off. So I've had that kind of feeling many times where I've been breaking a dress code by wearing the same exact clothing that someone else would wear, but my body is different. And it's being objectified. And so I think I've just personally had that mindset of I don't want to have to stare at a woman's body so much to regulate something that honestly is up to all of us. I have 3 boys, and I have also like a lot of experience in sex addiction and lust addiction with family members of mine. And so I actually had a friend once who was like, hey, since you have like been through all of this trauma with your own experiences, does it ever frustrate you when your friends are around this family member who, is struggling with this, and they're like in a sports bra or they're in yoga pants or something like that? And I this was even while I was like really still deep in my recovery work, and I was probably very in trauma a lot, but I still had this like very passionate response of absolutely not. I think like my friends, if they want, could walk down the street naked, and it is up to that family member to be able to respond how they need to respond. Now, obviously, can we be courteous? Can we be aware that maybe people are struggling with things? Of course, but it is not our job. It is not my job to control someone else's thoughts. And I love now that we're starting to take that turn when it comes to dress code, to modesty, because modesty to me has always meant, are you trying to take attention and bring it on yourself? And honestly, like sometimes I do that with fully covered clothing.
Right.
So
with fashion,
yeah. With, all these different things. And so to me, it's more like, what is the intention here? If you know your intention, then you can adjust how you want to adjust. Just be comfortable. And honestly, most people probably aren't comfortable with the kind of clothes that we think are just like really extreme, right? Most people aren't that comfortable. You can see, they bring it up in the book here, how you can see people like tugging at things or looking in the mirror, pulling down their skirt, things like that. It isn't very comfortable to dress like that because you feel the eyes on you. But if you are comfortable, 100%, I think it is everyone else's job to plan on how they want to receive that information. So that's how I parent my boys now, is like, look, it is up to it. They're 6. Well, they're 7, 5, and 4. So I obviously don't go into a ton of detail with them, but I talk to them so much about objectification. So when we watch a movie, which all of my nostalgic movies do tons of objectification. But, you can have a fully clothed woman, and if the camera is panning up her body, we stop the movie and we talk to our kids and we say, why do you think the camera's focusing so much on her body right now? Why do you think they're talking about this? Why do we just want to open a conversation to be like, this is a real person, but the camera is wanting us to focus on her body.
Being aware of the thought
When we
process.
just make it aware, I think that's the first step that we can do for our kids, of just like, wow, isn't it funny that people want to just focus on a body so much when there's so much more to you than your knees or your finger. And they're like, yeah, why do we do that?
And making it, I like how you are making it like a logical response to it.
Yeah.
And saying it instead of just making the assumption. I love on 189, this reminded me of when you were talking about that. The truth is, when we stop giving beauty the power to make us, we take away its power to break us. I thought that was interesting, that a lot of people who make those comments about people's bodies or what they're wearing or how this isn't this and that and the other haven't done that deep work themselves.
Yeah.
And that sort of messaging is hard, and they're having a reaction as well. And it's been interesting. Most of my kids are grown and making a lot of their own, and they all make their own decisions about what they wear. And I have found, and I thought, I'm going to be really good about this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be so enlightened and just be
chill.
like, I don't care. You're more than a body. And what we wear, things that are appropriate to the activity and that we feel comfortable in. And what message are we trying to say about ourselves and signal to the world? And what I didn't realize that I'm not very good at it, is that beyond, like, it doesn't mean just sexualization of dressing, but there's like certain styles and there's certain ways of presenting yourself to the world that I just don't like personally and would never do for myself that my kids love.
Oh, no.
And that also, if I have found it really hard to bite my tongue and not objectify them as far as this sort of presentation that you're making to the world on how you dress and how you look, your body, what you do with your body is more important than our relationship, or more important than your ideas, or is this all we're going to talk about?
Right.
And it's been a lot harder than I thought it would,
I can
and it's
imagine.
It's just a different aspect though of this. Though, because I like how they're saying, like, when you compliment somebody, if you're always worried about like what they're wearing or how they look, you're missing other things like, do you admire her strength, talent, fashion choices, words, or actions? Say it. Skip the other stuff.
Yep.
And I thought, the what we're trying to do is to be kind.
Yeah.
For me, it's easier to be generous. I don't know why. This is like, I probably shouldn't be revealing this, but like, it's easier to be generous to like strangers than it is like your own family members. Like with your kids, you're like, yeah, but we don't do, we
This is our culture.
This is our culture. And this is how I want you guys to.
Yeah.
But I realized that can be a huge roadblock to really talking about more interesting things and connecting with somebody.
Yeah.
But it's all this idea of how they look being more important than anything else.
And
that hyper focus.
It's probably also coming from a place of fear, right? Where it's like
100%.
You want what's best. You want them to be like making the best choices so that they don't run into things that are painful or hard, or that other people are going to judge them.
Other people are going to think this about you.
Right. That totally makes sense.
And I've even said that. And I here's the thing, it didn't work. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
And I do think that it is hurtful, and I feel bad about it.
It's funny because I don't have kids yet who make their own choices. That's not true. But, like those kind of choices.
Yeah, where they live on their own.
Right.
And,
But I remember when I was 17, I told my parents I wanted to shave my head. And my parents were not happy. And my dad actually asked me if I would feel comfortable meeting the prophet of my church with a shaved head.
Okay.
And he talked about how if my dad listens to this, he's going to feel so embarrassed.
No, but see, like, I'm your dad in this scenario.
Yeah.
So go ahead. This is a safe place.
He just I think he was really scared that would then be a gateway to me then making all these choices that, the Sinead O'Connors of the world are making. And
she's created some really great art.
She is.
But to be fair, like, my whole thing would be like, well, then if you do that, then you probably won't become the president of the United States.
Right.
Like, you're closing doors for yourself.
They're closing opportunities.
Ridiculous.
It makes sense, right?
But it makes sense in my head.
Totally. And I see where he's coming from. I did eventually shave my head when I was 32.
Okay.
And a lot of people thought I was sick. But
that's another. Yeah.
But honestly, I think my parents by that point had recognized enough of the choices I had made, I found my way out of. So when I shaved my head, they were just like, okay. So, it's the fears that I think we realize, your fears probably will come true a little bit.
Yeah.
And we'll get through them.
Right.
So if we're going to make that comment about someone's appearance and we recognize it's probably also coming from insecurity or how I worry people are going to focus on it, if I can get past that, there's so much more interesting things to talk about, aren't there?
If I put it in the same category as why is she wearing a red shirt?
Yeah.
You're like, no one cares.
No one cares.
No one cares if it's a red shirt or a blue shirt. But I, for whatever reason, and I'm really worked up about that. Then that's saying something about, my fear about that. And I hope that we're working our way to a more enlightened society where we realize everyone's going to make different choices and that's okay. And they can still be the president of the United States.
In 15 years,
Call
and you'll
me.
be like, Whitney, I'll was where you once were.
I don't know. Let's go get some nachos. That's what I'll say. I'll have no answers. Moms, caregivers, and loved ones can and should step in to mediate looks-based comments directed at young girls when possible on
awesome?
193. And I wanted to ask you what your opinion is about that.
Oh, 100%.
What do you think that looks like?
Well, I can't shut up when I feel really strongly about something. I'm not the person to take to Thanksgiving dinners because I will
I want to go to
talk.
Thanksgiving.
I will talk. And so after this book, 100%, I was like, well, actually, we don't need to talk about that because this person is more than that. I probably could be softer in how I talk to people about this, but 100%, I think it's maybe what we were talking about before of just if we can be vulnerable about this and let someone know, actually, I know, comments like this actually were really hard for me. See, for me, I think it's helpful to stay in the I and the me. When I go into the you and the we, it starts to put people on their defense. So for me, I can maybe intervene in these situations by turning it into my experiences. And I know that when people have said this about me, it's actually been really difficult. And so I actually really love how this person does this, and I want to talk about that. I don't always say it in that neat of packaging. It probably more comes out as and she's really good at sports.
Right.
But I'm trying. I'm doing my best. And they are too. And when I just say that to myself every time, then I think I can usually come out with a little bit more compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that creates space for other people to do it as well because it is a clunky thing and it is awkward sometimes. I don't know, I've had that situation where you're like, oh, you look so pretty. And you're also very smart and I'm proud of you for everything that you're accomplishing, And I think that's okay. I like that we're acknowledging, in kindness. And I think that the people that we surround ourselves with hopefully give us that sort of grace to be able to change habits and to set people up for success.
I think if we're open and vulnerable, that grace will meet us, right? It's the same as when you're meeting someone who maybe identifies themselves different from how you're used to using pronouns.
Yeah.
And I still will mess up sometimes when I meet someone and I'm so sorry and I feel mortified because I want this person to feel comfortable. I want them to, but I think if I offer my commitment and vulnerability, they usually will meet me with grace and be like, I'm just glad you're trying.
Absolutely.
And I'm, here with you. So I think if we as women, as people, can also just meet each other with, I'm so sorry. I almost texted you the other day when I mentioned that that your leather joggers looked so cool. I wanted to text you afterwards and be like, I did it. I met you and the first thing I said was image-based. And I'm so like hyper-focused on not trying to do that.
I do the same thing though. I do.
I should have sent the text, but I'm telling you now on air because it's worth more.
I like it. And is it okay? Like, and also I think if it's not focused, then those conversations and those things, we don't have to totally watch our language.
Yeah.
And we can give each other the benefit of the doubt and not be so easily, offended. I didn't even think twice about that. And also, I do know too that you and I both like fashion too.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes we don't need to betray fashion.
Right. I mean, it was in the spirit of fashion.
We like it, and that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's the intent, right?
Yeah.
It was the intent of it. And but that idea about being vulnerable, I think, is the key to it. I remember one time when I lost a lot of weight and it wasn't healthy and I was grieving and going through a horrible time. And so when somebody was like, oh, you look great, you lost weight, it was like a dagger in my heart because I just thought I'd rather be fat and happy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like this, but that was coming from a place of me just being
it was all grief.
I was in the worst place in my life. And how is that person supposed to know?
Right.
That's what I mean. Like, that person, I'm not mad at them. It wasn't inappropriate.
Right.
Like at the time, they weren't trying to be mean or whatever. I'm just saying that by taking a step back at a time where now I feel good about it or whatever, I'm not holding grudges and I'm not saying, oh my gosh, now what can I say? Well, no, I can't say anything.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, isn't it interesting, these patterns and these trends?
Yeah.
And that being aware of them can make us connect more deeply with people.
Oh, yeah.
So instead, if somebody knew something like that, to be like, how are you feeling about this? Is this good or bad? You tell me.
I
just want to talk about it. It doesn't need to be
It doesn't need
all
to be
or
a
nothing.
minefield.
No.
I think it's more just now we have all these doors that we can walk through and understand more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, they even have like a quiz about that.
Yeah.
Well, I love that on 195. So like, okay, if you know someone's lost weight and you don't know how or why she did it, what do you do? A, compliment, compliment, compliment. The more praise about it, the better. Number 2, don't say anything. But next time you see her, throw a little like, you look so skinny. Or C, talk about anything else besides her looks, your job, your lunch, the dog walking by, anything. And it might seem like a trick question. And they're saying all compliments are nice, right? But most fluctuate. But think of it this way. Most of us fluctuate in weight for all kinds of reasons. All kinds of reasons. So you've never looked better. Now, and I get this a lot because I'll be like, oh my gosh, when you were pregnant. And keep in mind, I had 5 babies. So I was pregnant for years.
The way you used to
People
look.
will be like, oh my gosh, you looked horrible.
Don't ever
you
go
looked
back to
so
that.
uncomfortable. Remember how big your nose was? Like people will still say that to me now. Like, you looked horrible. And I'm always like, yeah, I was growing a human being. All right.
I had a lot.
I had a lot going on, and also like, that's what my body did. And also, who cares? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm really tricky about that. But what the whole point of what they were saying is that, are you trying to say something that means you should take up less space? Or are you saying something generous? And that's how you know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. If we're just generous and we can be generous with ourselves and with others, I think it starts with ourselves. I think we're going to get those comments from people. But we don't have to then, I think the thing I keep thinking now, they said it in this book and it just has been my paradigm shift is who told you what size was the best size to be? Who was it that said this was how you needed to look?
Yeah.
Because if I think back on it, nobody right now is actively telling me that. They're parroting someone else's telling them that at some point in their lives. So if we all just like, oh, I see where it started, then we can all just recognize with each other, like, we don't have to use that language. We can just be kind.
And that goes back to the dress code when they're talking about is the dress code for the person or is it for the watcher?
Yeah.
And if we say, says who, or why should we do that, or why is that bad, or why is this, and kind of questioning that, then I think that it will reveal our motives.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, they do acknowledge on the end of page 200, and I wanted to make sure that I asked you about this. When we have very little control over what other people think when they look at us. And so they suggest gender neutral standards to kind of like making it better for everybody, and having inclusive dress policies, that kind of stuff. And I wondered, in the end, they talk about how they feel like this can be something that we all solve through like compassion. What do you think? How have you seen that work?
Yeah. I mean, I think going back to what I had brought up about, being in this business, you get exposed to a lot of uninvited opinions about the way you look. I remember there was someone on YouTube who ranked the female members of Studio C in order of appearance. And it has stuck with me. There are all kinds of things that people don't even recognize is going to stick with someone, right?
And again, that's how someone spends their time.
Yes,
and
right?
you don't have any control over that.
Right. I mean, the whole, my first process was, this is probably a really sad person in their parents' basement who has nothing going on, and this is how they make themselves feel better. But it still was making me feel like I know where I came in on that ranking. It wasn't first, it wasn't second, and there are only 3 of us. So I went on with my life thinking, how do I still feel good about myself, even though I know there are plenty of people out there who are looking at me from that spot and are making judgments about it, and I come in contact with it.
Yeah. And you don't have any control over it.
I don't have any control over it. Well, I did have control over whether I read comments, so I stopped doing that.
Probably good.
It was just for many reasons good to not read the comments. But also, I recognized, I love what Lindsay and Lexie say in here about how when we are seeing ourselves from the outside, we are giving privilege to another person's perspective. And I think by this point in my life, I know I'm not there yet where I'm wise beyond my years, but I've lived enough to know that I'm strong. I have lived enough to know that I am here now with the tools that I've gathered because of how I respond to situations. And the beautiful thing is, I know everyone else has those tools too. Everyone else is going through these circumstances where we're all just trying our best.
Yeah.
So sometimes we hurt people. Sometimes people hurt us. But in the meantime, we're taking the tools we can from that situation and we're moving on. So if I know that I've gotten here based on the things inside of me that someone's not going to see when they see me on the outside, I think it's more easy to first then respond with, okay, that's what you think. Just a couple months ago, someone leaned out of their car when I was walking to pick up my son from school and shouted, "Lose some weight, you fat," and said a really bad word that is derogatory towards women. And
oh my word.
I legitimately, my first thought was what is this person going through that made them lean out of their car and shout at a stranger like that? It was obviously really jarring, but I think just all the tools I've brought with me now made me realize this person's in a really hard place and they're not able to be compassionate right now.
That's a very generous reaction.
I was also in a Marco Polo, so I was but I think just the more that we recognize we got here because of what's on our inside.
Yeah.
And then we have compassion for ourselves, then we can then start to turn that outwards and recognize whatever this person is on the outside, there's so much that I don't understand that's going on inside, for better or for worse, that I can then have compassion for them. So I think just over and over, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but if I can then peel away a little bit of that exterior, you might not be able to know exactly what's going on with me, but I'm very happy to have a conversation if you want. Plenty of people will come up and ask me "Oh, you're Whitney, can I get a picture?" And when I'm with my kids, I say, I don't take pictures when I'm with my kids, but I would love to have a conversation. And all of a sudden, they're no longer a really annoying person who's bothering me while I'm out shopping. They are a person who has a name, who has a story. We maybe start talking about their friends at school. I just think isn't it so beautiful that once we actually start telling each other actually I really struggle with that too. And it's okay. that then all of a sudden all of us become these like gooey, like beautiful beings.
Right. And are so like willing to like want to share.
Exactly.
In that.
I just think like vulnerability, like just Brene Brown all the way, right?
Yeah.
Let's just pair with her and recognize that like we're going to come up against these little control over what people think when they look at us. And so the first thing we can do is just say, I'm doing my best and I love myself.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and say like, hey, if you want to be vulnerable, we can unite. We can actually make something beautiful out of this.
And this is how the 4th chapter ends. And it's in the end, compassion will unite us. When we can learn to see ourselves and everyone else as more than a collection of parts to be seen, we can see our true humanity in all its complexity. And yeah, we can bond with people we used to write off as unworthy of our attention because of their looks. We can unite in vulnerability as we name our pain and help others see their value beyond their appearance. We can reduce the underlying tension we feel with people who comment on our bodies by calling it out and helping them see and say more. And we can band together to combat objectification, to identify it, uproot it, and replace it with opportunities to rise with resilience together. We aren't in this alone. We can make it to a better destination in partnership with each other. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and coming and talking about all these things and how it's affected you. And I just think that we all benefit from it, and that we're
more than bodies.
And when we feel better about our body, we give permission for other people to as well, and we make it better for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm really sorry about that person that yelled it, and I'm
not
not over it yet, and I'm really angry about it.
He's probably going to go to jail soon. It's fine.
Yeah. Probably.
That's the catty side of me.
I know. We're not perfect. We're still working on compassion. I'm still like, that was beautiful. Also, what did his car look like?
You know what?
No, sorry. Not helpful. Not helping.
You know what? It unites me with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, this has been a really great discussion. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and being here to talk about it. And thank you for listening to Lisa's Book Club for the Lisa Show. Next time, we will be tackling Chapter 5. I hope you're reading along with us.